Hey, this is Evan Marquez, dating and relationship coach for smart, strong, successful women, your personal trainer for love. Apparently, I lost my voice somewhere in the past 15 minutes that I've been talking with my guest before the show. Her name is Maria, Matchmaker Maria, and she is the author of a new book. Before I get to her formal introduction, Maria and I have been friends for, she reminded me, nearly 15 years now. We've both been at our trades for a really long period of time. She is best in class. And one of the things that I really, really love about her is that she's a straight shooter and she has a killer sense of humor. It's that sense of humor that has led her to huge social media success. You've probably seen her. You're probably a bigger fan of Maria than you are of me if you were watching this right now. So she really is doing God's work, and not only does she set people up in lifetime relationships through her company, Agape Match, but she gives really savvy dating and relationship advice. She's married herself. She has two beautiful children, living the dream. Here is my formal introduction. Maria AVGITIDIS is the CEO of Agape Match, an award-winning matchmaking service based out of New York City, the host of the dating and relationship podcast, Ask a Matchmaker. Maria combines strong intuition with matchmaking methodology to leverage each client's unique personality, style, and history. Their love stories are a testament to how Maria has transformed matchmaking utilizing behavioral science and the unique know-how gained through her matchmaking inheritance. Matchmaker Maria and her advice for those seeking love has been featured in the New York Times, CBS Mornings, Time Magazine, The Washington Post, and more. I don't have enough time to praise you, but I do want to talk to you. Maria, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Evan. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I am. I asked you to join me. You're on a book tour. You're promoting what you're doing, but I asked you to be here because I think you have something super valuable to offer, very much of the moment. And so I have a whole list of questions. I almost want to throw them out, but I want to begin with your your understanding of how you help people get out of their own way when it
hmm
comes to finding love. Because as a dating coach, that's usually what I see. I don't do any matchmaking. I've got great respect for matchmakers, but I don't touch that. How do you help people get out of their own way in service of finding lasting partnership?
Ooh, it might be very similar to coaching. I think what coaching does really well is that there's this accountability aspect. And I think where matchmakers come in, it's the strategy of managing their loneliness. So there's the mix of both because I consider myself both, I'm a professional matchmaker, but I'm also a science-based dating coach. And, having feet in both ponds, it feels like, okay, I know what you're looking for. Let me look at this wish list, as I mentioned in the book. Let me look at your wish list and kind of see it with the reality check. And sometimes that reality check is, are you shooting way too high or way too low? But also, it's like, do I even have these matches that are interested in meeting you? And then I think with coaching, it's keeping them accountable to the things that at the end of the day, the goal is to get that person into a relationship. Otherwise, they wouldn't come and meet you.
Right.
And I think sometimes when people might hire a matchmaker, it's almost kind of like being a kid in the candy shop, right? Because you're suddenly through the network of the matchmaker that you've hired, you now have access to people that you may have never gotten to meet, right? Because you
Right.
just don't have time. A lot of people that hire matchmakers are extremely time poor. So, instead of you going to, the golf tournament to network with people, and instead of you going to the lawyers association or some chamber of commerce event to meet other people that are perhaps in your socioeconomic circle, there's a matchmaker who has access to all of these networks. So when you're that kid in the candy shop, suddenly it's like, for some clients, it'll be like, okay, that's great. Let's go to the next match. Okay, that's great. Let's go to the next match. And that
So it
coaching
becomes
side comes
online
in.
dating in a regard because they have an abundance of options and it'd be hard to settle on any one.
And it's so funny that you just mentioned online dating because I've had instances where a client will say to me, "Oh, I don't want to meet her because I could have met someone like her on Hinge." And in my mind, I mean, I always respond with, "But you didn't. You're not on Hinge, or if you are, you've never swiped on this person." And there's no middleman there keeping you both accountable. As a matchmaker, my job is not only to introduce you, but to coordinate, at least for my company, we coordinate both their first and second dates. Because I want to build momentum. I don't want my clients to accidentally forget because they're busy on a weekend. And, that coaching aspect in matchmaking is just so fantastic because you can bring your client back to the goal, which is like, I'm so happy and elated that you thought this person was wonderful. Let's keep going. Let's see how that is. I'll keep searching, but tell me more. When's your next date? Like the emails and the text messages and the communication with the client is, it's almost like kind of like improv, like, and, okay. And like, keep going on those dates. Don't stop dating this person. Let's follow through.
Dating requires momentum. Like there's just a natural organic pace when something's really going well. And I think it's great that you have that built-in structure that allows people to be the best they can be in the context of your matchmaking. The thing I want to grab onto is probably I don't know if it's controversial, but it's things that people have a hard time saying. Most people, except for you, I would think, have a hard time saying things like this. Um, when people want something and they're not always delivering the thing that they want, right? What do you have to offer to a partner?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get people to hear you on that? Because I think that's got to be one of the toughest things. Hey, I paid you a lot of money to hand me my partner. How do you get there?
Sometimes you have clients who won't even let you get there. But it always starts, I think, with two questions. And I do mention this in the book as well, which is, there's two lists. I think a lot of people work in lists, but there's technically two lists that if we're going to have lists, these are the lists, right? The first list is, what are you looking for, right? And before you read the book, and I mean, this question comes up quite early, but before you keep going, that list is going to be for a lot of people likely really good, but also slightly superficial. You kind of, if I went through that list, I'd ask like, okay, well, why is this important to you, and why is this important to you, and how do you define this? So for instance, in that list of what you're looking for, some people might mention like physical attributes, might mention religion, but they also might say words like they're kind, or they're ambitious, or they're intellectually curious. And then I like to dig into those questions more and ask like, well, what does ambition mean to you? Because I've had instances where a client was the chief technology officer of a major, major company, a company that I think all of us have their app on our phone. And when I set him up with a woman, she came back and said he wasn't ambitious enough. And I'm like, girl, he's the CTO at this company. What do you mean? And she's like, well, I like guys who are willing to change careers every 2, 3 years. So her metric of ambition doesn't take into consideration the stock options this person might have. So, that first list is always a very interesting list, but the second list is the most important list. And that is is what do you bring into a relationship? What makes you unique? What makes that person lucky to even go on a second date with you? So if you are able to do these two exercises, I feel like it actually maybe even stops a little bit of that post first date anxiety, because if they don't call you, wow, they just missed out on someone really great, you. But also it's the capability and the ability of seeing yourself as someone who has full autonomy on these dates, right? Like I think a lot of people when they leave first dates, they think, oh, I hope they like me. And really, if you kind of think in that second list, it's like they'd be crazy not to like, do I even like them? And it kind of just leaves the standard up.
No, I love what you're saying. I'm almost like leaping out of my chair because it's so validating. Not that, I need the validation, but everything you're saying is some version of
Sure, yeah.
what
I
I
mean,
have
if you've been working in the coaching space for so long, we're gonna.
right. No, just the idea that independently we found our own language to arrive at almost identical conclusions.
Yeah.
I find really, really exciting because listen to this podcast, know of the lists that I ask people to make and how we get there. So I think it's I think that's constructive. What happens when have you ever had someone who, when you ask them what they bring to the table, and I ask them what they bring to the table as a partner,
Yeah.
they have like a moment like, oh shit. Because they think like, oh, what I bring to the table is I am ambitious, I am hardworking, I'm tenacious, I'm right. And then it's like, well, what does he get out of the relationship? And they said, I never really thought about what I bring to a relationship as a partner. I think about who I am on paper. I think of my resume. Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And that's how we've labeled our second list too. Like what qualities do you bring into a relationship? And I dissect a lot of this list in the book, but there is I don't think we think of ourselves as unique. So I've done this exercise with over 1,000 people, in person or virtually, all these years, way more than 1,000 times. And it's always interesting to me that when they do these two lists, and I time them, the first list tends to be a lot longer than the second list, which is the more important list. And then when you look at the second list, half of those qualities are what they wrote in the first list, right? Because if you're looking for someone kind, then you might describe yourself as kind. If you're looking for someone who's hardworking, you might describe yourself as hardworking.
Correct.
And that makes sense. But some of the examples that I use of like, what do you bring into a partnership? What do you bring into a relationship has nothing to do with those characteristics. So I'll give you a few examples of myself.
Sure.
If you ask me as a single person, what do I bring into a relationship? One of the things that I would say is I read a newspaper every day. Come hell or high water, that newspaper, maybe two newspapers are being read every day. And so to a lot of people, that might not seem like a valuable quality to have in a relationship. But to the person that I'm looking for, someone who might be interested in current events and maybe critical thinking of like, our present day, or the past, or maybe they like history or whatever it is, I can have those conversations with them. And that makes me feel like that's my love language, is talking about sociology, anthropology, current events, politics, right? So what we think of, like a few other examples really quick. What I bring into a relationship: I'm a good cook, I'm a great listener, I'm a strong critical thinker, I'm really logic based, and I'm incredibly loyal. These are typically not the kinds of words that someone would put on that list, because that list is, we never think about ourselves as, how do we show up in the relationship? If your ex-boyfriend thought about you, what are the words coming out of their mouth? The words that they might describe you, let's just say that relationship ended amicably, but the words that they're describing you are not the words that you think. They're not going to say they're ambitious, they're hardworking, they're kind. They're going to get really granular. They're going to say stuff like, I love how close she is with her family. If she has an idea, she's getting that idea done. She's a really good party host. And maybe me saying about ex-boyfriends sounds like fantasy land, because I don't think we're ever going to ask our ex-boyfriends what they think of us. But think about your best friends. Your best friends don't think about you in this way. And I'm going to just say one last thing before I lose this thought. For anyone listening who may be experiencing some sort of trauma or even an STI or grief, and you're like, oh, how do I date when I have all of this baggage on me? Think back to your friends. The way your friends describe you, they wouldn't say, the first thing out of their mouth would never be like, Melissa has herpes. They would say Melissa is, this amazing person who, she's a analytic pro. I don't think I would say that. She's a great cook. She's a great host. She's an idea maker. She's a person who gets stuff done. Like, do not make the thing that is your baggage your core identity, because nobody else is identifying you with that core identity.
Yeah. And I think that's really hard for people because that's like the black cloud that hovers
It
over the head.
is.
I'm on Prozac. I had two abortions. I've been divorced twice. So those things tend to, people want to like dump that on someone right there on the first date. If I could get this
Yeah,
out of the way and they still like me, right? And that's not you're not leading with your confidence and your strength, the stuff that your best friends know about you. Everything you just said, by the way, is how I write people's dating profiles. I say,
right.
hey, you're smart. What does your partner get out of you being smart? So my wife is the one who explains the plot of A Midsummer Night's Dream to me, since I can't follow Shakespeare. My wife makes me a color-coded Excel spreadsheet to help me prepare for a fantasy football draft, right? Her intelligence has a direct effect on me. And so
Right.
if we're really working on that marketing piece, it's really neat how, once again, you and I are converging on these ideas. So
I feel like my husband would say Maria's a master at correspondence, because every year he has no idea what's going on with our Christmas card. And I don't want anyone to think like her husband doesn't help. No, this is my
It's
thing.
your
Like,
project, your
it's
baby.
my project for Christmas. I do it in November. It gets out to 210 people. 150 of them live in Greece. So the postage is killing me. And the worst part is that a lot of our family lives on islands. So they don't get our Christmas card until about April. And it's like it's so annoying. But it's funny, is like for 6 months we're getting messages from our friends like, oh, I just got your Christmas card. And so my husband, when he talks to family, back in Greece, he's always like, oh, they got our Christmas card. I can't believe you sent it to them. And I'm like, wherever we go, I'm always asking for people's addresses. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's like one of his favorite qualities about me, is like the correspondence.
I think that's cool. You know how my wife and I do it. We divide and conquer.
I just need you to know that your Christmas card, because we are honored to receive it every Christmas, my husband and I, we have a tradition whenever it comes in. It's
I'm
like,
almost embarrassed right now.
listen. Evan's Christmas card came in, and that means that whichever day works for both of us that week, we won't even open it. Once the kids go to bed, we go downstairs, we pour some spiced wine, and we open up your Christmas card and we read it. And it's just like a tradition now. It's like, Evan's card's here, Christmas can begin. Even though you're Jewish, Christmas is started.
Um, I'll just be neutral on that one, but it's a labor of love the way I'm sure yours is a labor of love.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, let's keep our focus on you and your stuff. Um, I think anybody who's listening right now who is interested in you, has found you on social, loves your straight talking advice and your self-awareness. And we all feel some version of the same thing, right? The world's on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is really working the way we want it to, and we're just left to make the best of these circumstances. So, short of pick up the phone, hire Maria, regular folks are, all over the country are thinking, I have these dating apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can they be used as a force of good? Do you recommend people get off them? And if they should continue to use them in addition to whatever real life tools they're using, how can we make this a more pleasurable, effective experience?
Um, First off, let me answer the first question, which is like, you should absolutely be using online dating apps. But it is okay to take a break if you need to. But if you are going to use online dating apps, you have to think of them as a tool to meet up. So we have to get rid of certain words in how we talk about those apps. What you need to know about these apps is that they belong in the lifestyle section of the App Store, which means that they're there to entertain you.
Mm,
And if you don't believe me, think about the last time someone swiped. They were probably on the toilet, at line at Starbucks, maybe at a red light, or laying on their couch while an episode of, their favorite show was playing in the background. They're not being used the way dating websites were used. So let's talk about that, because I do mention this in my book as well. I've written in chapter 1. There was a time when we had to log on to the internet, and right, and you had that modem sound and all that stuff. But let's fast forward a little bit. I remember when I was post college, joining my first online dating website. I had a desktop, and I had to log into match.com or chemistry.com, I think I used.
sure.
And what's interesting about that experience is that I would scroll through profiles, and then when I was done, I would log off. But
Hmm.
now we all have a computer in our pocket, and we have notifications coming in, and it's just entertainment. And I can appreciate that the CEOs of these apps, may say stuff like, we have the most marriages. Sure, but you also have a lot of people on them. Of course, you're going to have marriages. It would be weird if you didn't have marriages. But what I do see from everyone that I meet, and I assume your listeners are experiencing this as well, is extreme dating fatigue, right? Because remember, the way these apps were created was as websites. And before the websites, there was video dating, where you actually had to physically drive to some great expectations at a strip mall and go
Right.
in. And before
But there was
that,
an investment of time, energy, money because this was a priority.
and also there was a an actual action of, okay, I'm done now, I have to go back to my real life, right? These are all strangers to me.
Yeah.
So what I always advise is that we have to stop thinking of them dating apps and think of them as meetup apps. One of my colleagues, matchmaker Louis Felix, is the one that taught me this, to think in this way as meetup apps. I think it's the most brilliant way, because when you have it as a meetup app, it actually takes all the pressure off in, when and who you meet, but also in how it changes also how you communicate with the people that you're on. And so that change is actually becomes a lot quicker, right? We don't have to make our first dates these elaborate dinner dates with strangers that we don't actually know. If it's a meetup, let's just do a vibe check. So after a few messages, you don't need to talk to someone for a week. After a few messages, if you want to meet up with them, you would say, hey, you seem interesting. Let's go, let's meet up. Say the word meet up. Let's go for a walk and maybe grab a gelato now that the weather's getting better. Grab a gelato and see if we vibe. And by the way, 84% of men have said that they want you to ask them out. But this is even barely asking someone out. You're just saying, let's go for ice cream and see if we vibe. You're even setting the expectation of what you hope could be the outcome or not. And so when you think of it in this way, not only do you go on more dates, you might be also attracting better dating behavior, because it's just gelato. It's just a walk. And if it's not gelato, it's coffee. If it's not coffee, it's a glass of wine. Like, you're just trying to see if we vibe. And if we don't vibe, all right, on our merry way. And I think that's how we have to think of the apps. And that's how I have them in the book. I call them the apps. I try not to use dating apps. Like, they're always being called the apps, capital T, capital A.
Okay. Well, this is great because this is the first source of disagreement that we've had today.
Okay.
But you make a really compelling case, and I want to like hold that up and elevate it and point out
What
that
do you disagree with?
um, I agree with the fact that times have changed and it's changed people's behavior, but my inclination is to push back in the opposite direction. I want dating to feel like dating. I want someone to talk to a guy on the phone or FaceTime prior to meeting. I want him to make an investment in her and take her out to dinner on Saturday night. Because if you
On a
imagine,
Saturday night for a first date?
Mhm.
Apps, no, we can. I'll throw elbows for this.
Like I don't want to throw elbows because you're a guest on my show, but I want dating to feel like dating, not a meetup vibe check.
But
Let's see
what
if
I'm
there's
saying
chemistry.
is dating. So what I'm saying is that's actually how our parents met, right? Our parents didn't use these apps. Our parents are almost everyone's parents. If you were born, before the year 2000, almost all parents met
In real life.
out. They
Yes.
met in real life, and it was usually through friends, synagogue, church, barbecue, college graduation, whatever's happening, but it was out and about. And that first meeting with friends, with other people around you, was a vibe check.
It
You
was
would set up
organic.
the
I agree.
real first date after that. I'm not saying you
I
shouldn't go on nice dates, but
I
a
I I
freaking
think
stranger on a Saturday night, oh,
I
that's
think if well,
pressure.
no, you could treat it like pressure. Again, if I could make my case,
Yes, yes, yes.
it's the 1990s jdatematch.com thing where I would talk to, I would email someone through the dating site, talk on the phone, build up trust, go on really good dates. If I just passed everybody through for the vibe check, I'd go on way too many blind dates with strangers, which is a different kind of soul sucking. So I want there to be some screening mechanism so I'm not just doing a half-hour gelato date 6 times a week. So
Sure.
there's
We
something
didn't
in
talk
between
about
those.
screening yet, but like, of course you should be screening. Like, I don't think you shouldn't be. I don't, first of all, I just want to say really quick, I don't believe dating is a numbers game. I don't know if you agree or
No, I
disagree
want
with it.
quality, not I want a quality, not quantity, which is why I would rather spend a week getting to know someone prior to a date, which again is not to negate what you just said, which has real value, but I would rather go on one quality pre-screen date a week than three semi-blind dates after a couple texts.
I don't believe in tech. Like, okay. I hear what you're saying. I think we're just saying it in different words, but
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
don't have
so
to like
much of my
take this.
book is built on fixing pickers and like how we choose who we go out with. And then the online dating chapter comes after. So, I'm just kind of like thinking about like whenever I talk about online dating, even with my clients, I first have to give them like, okay, but here's who we're looking for before you download this app. Like, let's discover your dating patterns. And these are things that are certainly mentioned in the book, but this is, and then, you mentioned before about FaceTime calls. I mean, if you are a person who has to juggle childcare, if you're a single parent, your first date should always be a FaceTime call. And I cannot think of a sane person who would not understand why you need to do FaceTime calls before spending money on a babysitter,
Sure.
and meeting a stranger.
I would guess between our two approaches, there's a decent overlap in the Venn diagram.
But
But
it's okay if there's not.
I
You know
know,
what I
but
mean?
I love that, and
Yeah.
we have something sort of similarish when it comes to sex. For me, I call it sex exclusivity. You don't sleep with someone who's not your boyfriend. Yours is a 12 date rule, if I recall,
Yeah. The 12-date rule method.
which kind of largely arrives at a similar conclusion. You want
Right.
to feel really secure with someone before you take that leap of faith, which changes everything. Is there more anybody should know about the 12 date rule?
They can read it in the book. It's like a whole chapter. And I feel like there's so many podcasts where that's been talked to death. Let's keep this podcast
No, well,
different and
we're
spicier.
gonna go highbrow. So
Yeah, let's
you and
go
I,
highbrow.
prior to our to recording, we're talking about the things that we read and how very
Yeah.
online we are reading about sociology and news and politics, et cetera. I think we're well aware that there is a loneliness epidemic. It
Hmm.
affects all of us in different ways. But this trickles down, of course, to singles when it comes to dating. Um, what do you think that single moms living in the suburbs who don't have much organic opportunity to meet guys, they work remotely, how can they do it, regardless of government policy, which I love the concept of it, but how does someone get out into the world when they don't even know where to begin because they're so exhausted from being a working mom?
But what does that have to do with the loneliness epidemic?
I think it has to do with the fact that these women feel the weight of the world on their shoulders and they're carrying everything sort of by themselves. There's no one to
Right.
support them, and they don't have much connection.
The reason why I'm asking you that
I
question.
conflated two things. You're
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, yeah. The reason why I asked that question is because I don't think a lot of single moms are lonely. I think they actually have really rich villages. They have to. It's by design when you're a single mom, you have to have a support system. And sure, there can be moments where you feel lonely, where you want a companion to support you through,
Okay.
but it's not the loneliness epidemic where currently, I mean, it's predominantly on men that don't have, like, they'll go days without talking to someone.
Yeah.
But if to go back to single moms, I think in general, single parents have to create alliances with their villages. My advice has always been pretty pretty straight, which is that you're going to have to meet other single moms where you can trade kids. So let's say your date night's Tuesday and her date night's Thursday. You've got her kids on Tuesday, she's got your kids on Thursday. And this way, or whatever I said, but
Yeah.
this way, if you do it this way, what ends up happening is that now you're forced to actually do something for yourself every Tuesday night.
Because you've carved out that date night, and so you better fill it with something.
But it doesn't have to necessarily be filled with dates. It could actually be like you could go take that community college class. You could go learn about wine tastings or tequila tastings. Or if it's not alcohol, you can go learn how to golf or play backgammon or learn how to play chess or whatever hobby you've been putting off. Like, this is the time to do it. That takes you out of the house. And what the consequence of that is, and this is advice for even non-single people, but the moment you fill up your social calendar and you've committed to something that's every single week, you're going to increase your social network. And so I see, like, now as a matchmaker, you're kind of thinking like a matchmaker, right? If as a matchmaker, when I get a client, I think to myself, like, okay, well, how do I meet this kind of person that they're looking for? Right now, I have this one client who's really interested in meeting women that, I mean, for lack of a better word, it's like old money, because he's old money.
Mm.
And so he's looking for someone who enjoys golfing, and for someone who is like, I want to say, like, a little bit more feminine in nature. And I hate using those binary terms, but there is a
Get it?
sort of thing, like, I'm not feminine in his eyes. Um, and anyway, so in him telling me what he's looking for, sure, I have certainly women I could set him up with, but I also started hitting up everyone I knew at Martha's Vineyard.
Mhm.
Right. So when you start to open up your social circle, then you have all these opportunities, and those opportunities are where, like, new connections happen. Your current friends aren't doing anything for you. You're going to have to start making new acquaintances. They could turn into new friends that build you those social networks to meet new people. I'll even give you a personal example. When I met my husband, the people that introduced us, I only became friends with them 3 months before. And had I not become friends with them, I would have never met, the love of my life, the father of my children. But I think sometimes we focus so deeply on, like, oh, but I'm friends with these loyal group. And I'm like, I'm not asking you to become best friends with these people. At best, I was acquaintances with the people that introduced me to my husband. But I had found the comfort level to get them to invite me out to do things.
Right. I mean, me and, all those years of online dating, I met my wife through acquaintances at a party. I mean,
Right.
I mean,
And how long did you know those friends, those acquaintances?
uh, I, they weren't close friends. A close friend introduced me to a bunch of people who were really social and had a lot of engagements, and so it was a group we called the Blob, because we didn't even know how we knew each other. But I
Mm-hmm.
went out with this one woman in this house, went on 2 dates. She was Italian. She rejected me after 2 dates. She's like, "You American men aren't passionate enough." She wanted me to, like, write her love sonnets after two
Oh,
dates.
she was like Italian,
Italian,
not like,
Italian.
because when you
Yeah,
say
like,
Italian, I'm from Jersey. I'm like,
no,
okay,
no,
like,
this is like, I can make my own sausage by skinning a boar, Italian.
right, sure.
And so
Yeah.
I didn't come on strong enough. And she goes, "Oh, we could still be friends. I'm having a party on Saturday night. Would you like to come?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll come to your party and ignore you is what I'll do." And so that's where I met my wife, at a party with acquaintances who introduced me to acquaintances, where I went out with someone. And I think that real life alchemy is, again, there's not a lesson in it other than the more opportunities you have to do stuff like that, the more things that could spark.
Yeah, one of my clients did something so interesting. I actually think I even mentioned in the book as an example. She really wanted to meet people that lived, she had just moved to the area, the area that she lives in, and she really wanted to meet young men, and she just didn't know, like, where, because she didn't live, like, next to a major city or anything. And we were strategizing a little bit, and I was like, there's a golf course in your town. Find out when the next tournament is. And she's like, why? And I'm like, well, you're going to ask them if you can volunteer at the registration desk. And,
And
there was a
everybody's
torn.
forced to talk to you at the registration desk.
That's right. And, 6 weeks later, that is exactly what happened. There was the local university was hosting a fundraiser. And, if it's a local university's fundraiser, who's coming? It's alumni, professors, postdocs. Like, it's not 21-year-olds,
Yeah.
right? And she was a woman that was like 33, 35. And she met every single guy. I mean, first of all, the people running this, the foundation, were just so thrilled that someone was willing to volunteer their time. But she was able to meet every single man. And, sure enough, after that, after you check people in, you're just kind of loitering around a bit, right? And she got to talking to a few guys, and I don't know what ended up happening. I remember she started dating one of the men that she met at that golf tournament. I don't know if they ended up getting married. I'll have to look into that, but I
But the
always
point
thought
of
that
the
was
story
interesting.
is not the marriage. I mean, I really love,
Carving opportunities
yeah.
is what matters. That's all that matters.
I love how you think, and I love when I talk to someone who sees certain things clearer than I do. And I think this is one of those cases where I've been such an online dating advocate for many years. right? There's a reason that you are at the head of the matchmaking industry and do the matchmakers conferences. You are a real connector, and you could see how that stuff works. I
Yeah.
think like a quarterback who's been playing for a long period of time, and you see the game before it happens. I think you've got a really great aptitude for that, Maria.
Oh, thank you, Evan.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to give a genuine compliment, so don't worry about it. Um, epistemic bubbles. Um, what we come to believe, how the what we call the tyranny of small differences, how little things can divide us because everybody's a brand, everybody states what they feel publicly. We could
Yeah.
find things wrong with everybody. This is a really big, vast, it's probably its own podcast, but it's this big, vast thing that's making it harder and harder for people to connect with each other. And I would imagine it's making harder for you to do your job as a matchmaker.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody asked me recently at an event that I was speaking at a few days ago, like, what's the hardest part of your job? Matching people with religion. And I'm like, no, that's the easiest part. Are you kidding? It's the hardest is getting people that live in the same reality. And it's, that's actually what chapter 3 in Ask a Matchmaker focuses on, which is like, are we too different to make it work? And, when I was writing that chapter, when I started writing my book, um, President Biden was president, and I was feeling the difference of how people that knew I was a Democrat would like kind of, if they weren't Democrats, how they would talk to me. And the interaction that I write in the book happened, in 2022. I wrote about it in the book at the end of 2023. And I could never have imagined that example that I write in the book would have been so relevant into 2025 when I wrote it. I just thought this was a weird interaction, but
Can,
we also live in
can you
different
share that?
realities. So, absolutely, I'll share the interaction. So the interaction was I was at a community event, and an acquaintance, like I don't know this person like that well. I know their name. I know that I can tell that they're a really good parent, very present. They come to all of their kids' things and all that stuff. Um, he went to sit down next to me. We were waiting for like a theater to begin. And he said, "Can I sit here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And he's like, "Oh, I just didn't know if maybe you don't like sitting next to Republicans." And I was just like, "Okay, like, all right." I didn't know his politics at that moment, but I just didn't even know that we were about to talk politics. So I was like, "You can sit." And then on his own, he was just like, you Democrat, this was now in 2020. This conversation happened in 2022. He said, all you Democrats care about is trans kids. And I remember thinking, like, once he said that I bet this conversation is going to get repeated to all of his friends. So maybe I need to be more careful with my words just in case, because, I could have just told him off and like stormed away. But I was also sitting there first. And also, I'm like a master debater. So, like, let's go. So I said to him, you just said that you're a Republican. I guess you know that I'm a Democrat. I got to tell you, I've never talked to other Democrats about trans kids. Like, that's not just something that we don't, you guys talk about it a lot. And, like right now you're bringing it up, but I'm just here to watch this show. And he goes, when your kids are older, you'll see you guys are always pushing this trans agenda. And I was just like, again, trying to find the words. And then I remember thinking at that moment, like, him and I live in such different realities that he thinks that this is literally what Democrats must be just talking about every day. And look
And,
at us talking about it
only
now.
because he's been told that over and over.
Right. And with respect to the silo that he belongs in, because I also belong to my own silo, I decided to actually find a way to talk about things that I really do talk about. Like,
Hmm.
and that is like a woman's right to her own healthcare decisions. So I said, my response to all this at the end was like, listen, like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I do know that if a child, and I don't think I even said child, I said if a parent's child is considering being trans, that's not a light decision for any family. But I do know that that's a private decision that has nothing to do with me. And I could say that about other things that I actually do think about, like
Mhm.
the privacy that I should have access to, as a citizen of this country, I suppose, or whatever is afforded to me from the 14th Amendment. And then I decided to kind of, I don't want to say pander, but I spoke to his own instincts, which is like, look, you care about your kids. You're here for your kids right now. I care about my kids. I bet you and I have more things in common than you think we have not in common. Maybe next time, don't assume you think you know what I talk about, but also like acknowledge that you and I have very different information systems of how we consume what we're about to say to people. And now fast forward, so I wrote that in the book. I never thought that we would, you know, when I sent my final manuscript, I think a lot of people thought Kamala Harris was going to win. So my final manuscript, actually, I shit you not, excuse my language, it was sent to the publisher on November 1st
Mm.
of 2024. So I had a very different expectation of how that week would turn out. And, sure enough, and now we're talking again about trans kids. And I'm like, okay, like, I guess this is a conversation that we have to protect, families and kids and their privacy, I suppose. Like, that's my own perception of it. But to kind of get back to the realities, the recently former transportation secretary Pete Buttigieg said on another podcast about how there was a time when most people got their news from Walter Cronkite. So for any listeners who don't know who that is, he was like extremely well respected journalist. Back then there were only like 3 channels on TV, so everyone, at 6 or 7 p.m. whenever his show was on, you would tune into the news there and you just trusted him that he would give you the facts. And that's kind of like who he was, right? He was extremely revered as a journalist, as a reporter, and as the anchor of a major, news television program. What the conclusion of that though is that everyone was kind of dealing in the same reality. We can all have different solutions to the problems, but we could all agree on the same problems. What's happened in 2025, and it's been happening for a few years now, is that we are all in our respective silos. Like, we're all in our respective information bubbles. We all listen, we all get, not everyone gets their news from TV. A lot of people get their news from podcasts, from X or Threads or Facebook. Some people don't even get news at all. They have their heads in the sand. And that's another demographic on its own, right? So as a result, we can't even agree on the problems, let alone look for a solution. And so, even in my book, I said something like, they used to say men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Well, at this present time, I'm seeing that we are on like 80 million different planets and we're all just trying to figure it out. And I think that, if to kind of go back now to the first thing I said, like, the hardest part of my job is matching people based on a shared reality.
I think that's true, sobering. Listening to you, and again,
It's scary actually. Like, I think anyone listening to this is probably panicking, and I'm sorry.
you sound like me at a dinner party. I mean, like really, like everything you're saying is like you and I are probably in the same information silo, and we're reading sort of the same things about what's going on. You've got your story, and it immediately leapt into mine. I've had a story about when I was away and during the pandemic. We were at some Mexican resort. It was about the end of it, so it was masks off, and we're in a restaurant, and some family sits down next to us at this like hibachi type Benihana
Yeah,
type
yeah.
place. And he's from Utah and I said I'm from California. He's like, California, Gavin Newsom. Like that was like a punchline, right? Gavin Newsom. And
I couldn't
he
even tell you who your governor is, dude.
right, he proceeded to sort of do
Gun to
the
my
same
head, I couldn't even tell you who the governor's name of Utah.
right. But he proceeded to do the same thing that your guy did to me, make all these sort of
Yeah.
assumptions about me. And I tried to do exactly, hey, I'm trying to be a good representative of California Democrats. And so
You know what I loved about that
I tried to find
interaction?
something in common with the guy.
Right.
And by
And
the end,
that person was a complete stranger to you. And I think the best part of like my interaction was that this person, um, not only does he know me and might know my family, he he knows I'm a business owner.
mhm,
Um, and I think for a lot of people, they're just like, and not only my business owner, I also go to church every Sunday.
Mhm.
So in that world, it does not
Small business
compute.
owner, churchgoer.
Yeah, a churchgoer who gets her hair and makeup done every day. Like I could be a gold star Republican from the Zoom out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't have blue hair. My nails are never black. I got married, I had two kids, like I go to church every Sunday. I'm on my church council. And I think that is where people tend to short a little bit. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what do you mean? What do I mean? Like, just mind your own business
Yeah.
and pay your taxes. That's all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's really interesting to kind of dispel the assumptions sometimes just by even existing.
Um, I couldn't agree more. And again, it's probably its own podcast. I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
bring this closer to dating. Um, when people and we're going to leave the culture war stuff just
For
just
sure.
for
I
now.
mean, that is part of dating. The culture wars is what's hurting dating the most right
Of
now.
course, of
Yeah.
course. I'm really sort of more talking about the mechanics of it, the way we talked
Yeah.
about a first date, the way we talked about sex. So I have strong feelings about this. My presumption is because you are so much like me, you have strong feelings about this. People's dating timelines, right? When should XYZ happen? I'd like
Yeah.
to hear your timeline and compare it to the one that I have in my head. When do you think certain milestones should take place that in a healthy fashion?
So, towards the end of my book, I go into timelines and I do preface the chapter by saying, I hate this question the most, but fine, gun to my head or my publisher, jabbing me, I'll write something for you. And I do say that. I say, like, I hate answering this question. I don't know you. I don't know how ready you are. Like, there's all these things that I have to assume,
All the
right?
caveats.
Yeah, yeah, all the caveats. So put those aside, zero context. Here's a timeline. Like, here's what I think you should be doing. And so I do make some there before you can ignore the caveats, but there are certain information points you can't ignore. So for instance, if you are under the age of 27, you should be in no rush to get married to the person that you're dating. You should be dating at least 2 years, mainly because the divorce rate just plummets if you just wait 2 years, right?
Yes.
I actually think I learned that from you years ago, like 9 years ago or something. Like we had read a study together by Dr. Terry Orbuck, I think. And I remember discussing that with you, and I was like, oh, but there is this super highway timeline. I think that's when people ask about timelines, it's usually people who are on the super highway. Like, I just met someone, I'm dying to get married and have kids. What's appropriate? And I have discovered with some clients, if you utilize certain tools like Esther Perel's Where Should We Begin card game, or going to a couples therapist, so get all those vulnerabilities out and like learn about each other. The super highway timeline is 9 months dating, 9 months engaged, get married.
Okay, and that's for people late 30s who want to have kids.
Yeah, like I would advise this for anyone, over the age of, let's say, 33. So it doesn't have to be late 30s, but I would hope that there has been some dating experience prior to that. Again, this is without caveat, so it's
No,
really
I
hard.
get it. When people are looking for something to hold on to, they don't have to take it literally because it's not hard science. This is the use case every time. It's a generality, and I think that's useful. My wife and I were engaged in 16 months,
Okay.
married 6 months later, immediately
Okay.
started trying to have kids because she was 39. And
So
and that
yeah,
was and that was too fast for me. I just didn't have a choice.
and in that model, I think I say like 9, 9, and 9. So it's like 9 months dating, 9 months engaged, and then 9 months married before you start having kids. So I kind of get to know each other. For my timeline, because I don't know if I necessarily believe in, I do know that there are things that happen that shouldn't be happening. So when people ask about timelines, I actually care more about the timelines in the beginning. Like, for
Mm.
instance, if they're not your boyfriend or girlfriend by the 3 month mark, and I'm being super generous here, I would say 6 weeks if you were asking me for real. But
Can
if
I
it's not
say,
the
can
three
I
month
stop
mark,
you and say that I love you?
it's
That
just never going to happen. Like, this is a This is
You're
a
like,
waste of time,
I say the exact same thing, and I made up the same 6 week arbitrary. If this guy hasn't taken his profile down, focus on you in that time. He's
Yeah, I just
no,
have never seen it. I've
yeah,
never seen it. Like people will tell me like, "Oh, but my sister," that's lore.
right.
That's lore to me, right? Like it's just like when I tell people the 12-day rule, they're like, "Well, you know, like I remember being at this venue and this person raised their hand. This was so mortifying. And this must have been 10 years ago. And they said, "Well, I had sex with my wife on our first date."
Yep.
And I was like, "Great. How many women did you have sex with on a first date that you didn't marry?"
Yes.
Like you just won the lottery and you're telling us to now go to the local convenience store and buy a lottery ticket because you
Hmm.
won.
Yes.
Congrats. Like I don't know how to react to these things because it's so rare
Well,
that
that's really what you're talking about, in my opinion, is very high critical thinking skills. So the no, and
yeah.
I mean that like it's what you and I are up against. People want to feel the instant, oh my God, you just know chemistry thing.
I
And so
don't know
everybody's
anyone
got
like
some
that.
story, the oh my God, my parents met and when they were married within days and they're together for 40 years or something like that.
Okay.
And I say some
Different
version,
times.
I say the same version of the same thing. Every woman that I just knew, none of them worked out. You're single talking to me. Everybody you just knew was the one, didn't work out. So that doesn't always have the best track record. Just because someone has that story and it did work out, it's the
You
exact
know,
same thing.
the story you just said, though, even as an anecdote, is actually my favorite story because in chapter 2, when I talk about my heritage in matchmaking, there's a lot of storytelling.
Sure.
So, but one of the things that I share is that, people, even in chapter 1, people got married quick. Like when people mention their parents, I remember one time I had a roommate and I said to her, you shouldn't marry. She was really young. She was 25. And she was like, I think, I want to marry him. And I was like, you shouldn't marry anyone before you hit the 2-year mark. You're really young. Like your frontal lobe is just developing. Like just, you like him. It's been 3 months. Like just keep dating him. No one's rushing you. And she was so offended because her parents got married in 5 months.
Yeah.
And I love that when people use their parents as the example, because let's talk about your parents. Your parents, 99% sure, met through their local community, whatever that is, college, church, synagogue, friends, barbecue, whatever it is, whatever opportunities I mentioned before, right? Which means, though, that they probably shared similar value system. They might even share already a similar religion or race, maybe a similar socioeconomic status. They have accountability partners in between and like their friends. And it's like you're not on the same level playing field as your parents when it's a relative stranger you met off of Bumble. Like these are two different environments. It's like telling a cheetah to breathe underwater because the goldfish can.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
In addition to that, we also know so much more than they did. There were so many people who got married. My mom married 21 years old, left her father's house, went to her husband's house. Um,
Because that was the only way she could establish an economic opportunity that was not afforded to her because she likely got married before 1974.
correct.
Exactly.
So we're in a completely different place now where women do have the option of building their own
Right.
careers and wealth. You don't need to do it. A lot of those marriages, people stayed together out of fear that everybody knows the story that keep people together for 60 years, but they weren't happy for 59 of them. So we're not trying to return to those things. It's funny how people use these anecdotes. Nobody would want to go back to dating in 1968.
I talk about my grandmother in my book. And what I remember, not the matchmaker grandmother, but my other grandmother, the one that I'm named after. And what I remember is that, she got married at the age of 15 after a genocide.
Mm.
And my grandfather was 30. And back then, because a lot of men had died in that genocide, like this is just what the age gaps were. They had 9 kids. The first 2 died and they had infant mortality. And my grandmother went through like a lot, then she survived another world war, a civil war. She survived famine, like, what a survivor. And the fact that her first and last name are on the cover of my book, I think about that all the time. And it just like makes me cry because it's like, wow, like I'm named after a survivor. And my story is not unique. If anyone Greek is listening, I know I just basically described your own grandmother. But what I find fascinating is that fast forward to when I'm a teenager, while my grandmother was still alive, I remember having a conversation with her. My grandfather had been dead for 20 years by then. And I was like, did you love did you love Papu? And she's like, no. Like, her love marriage is so foreign
Mhm.
because that's just not how it was done, right? Marriage has been a tool for millennia as to create economies between families. It's a market. And I think that we all need to stop talking about our parents on dates. If your
Have
parents are over 70 years old, stop talking about them on dates.
Have you read Eli Finkel's All or Nothing Marriage?
No, but I have read excerpts.
Okay.
Tell
Yeah.
me what you'd like
Or
to
yeah, again,
know.
if you haven't had him on your podcast, it's he he doesn't write like a coach. He doesn't write like a psychologist. He writes like a researcher at Northwestern, which is what he is. And so it's this sort of history of marriage. And yes, we're going to have 9 kids, and 3 of them are going to die in childbirth, and they're going to tend the fields, right? And then we get into the 1900s, and then there's something approximating more love rather than working on the farm, but there's still very highly gender roles.
Yeah.
And the further along we've gotten, he talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like now we're not looking for Maslow's hierarchy of needs anymore. We've gone so far. We need a man who inspires us. We need a man who is our hero. We need a man who is more me than me, right? Taller, smarter, richer, funnier, without my flaws. And he, almost like Lori Gottlieb in the book 10 years ago, talks about the good enough marriage. And that's kind of where it's at. Like, and nobody wants to say that out loud. And maybe matchmakers can't say that out loud, but I'll say that out
I
loud.
don't know. I think what Eli and Lori, I appreciate the history of dating. I also talk about it in my book as
Sure.
well. I don't I don't necessarily believe in like good enough marriage.
Okay.
Um, just like I don't know if I would ever tell someone to settle, but I do tell people to latch. And that verb, I think, is much more understandable because I think when people hear good enough or settle, they're thinking about the emotional workload that they're going to have to take on
Hmm.
because this person, women predominantly are looking for emotional compatibility now more than ever
Yeah.
because like you said, they make their own money, right? um I think when I say lash, it's like you met a great guy, okay, now latch, which is like keep dating this person and then figure out if you can make it work together, which might be the same messaging as, Lori and Eli, but I don't think it is. And the sense is like, you know, the good enough guy, like I don't, I think,
I think
yeah.
language matters, and there's nothing inspiring about that. So we would never.
Yes, there's nothing in that's what it is. There's nothing inspiring about it.
And so yeah, we remove the word settle from anybody's vocabulary, right? Like
Yeah.
that's no one wants to settle, and language does matter. But I look at it almost in the same way. And again, we're talking up here, you and I, behavioral economics, the same way that you choose a career or a city or a home, or have friends and
But women
family.
have changed. Like, I mean, as a matchmaker, I can tell you that women have fundamentally changed the last 3 years in what they're asking from matchmakers,
Yeah.
at least in my office, which is that like I rarely hear about height now.
Me
I
too.
hear about, I don't want to say therapy speak, but I hear like he's a whole human. He has passions, he has friends, he has hobbies. Like they want someone who has this whole life and they're not going to be some guy's whole world
Mm.
because that's where abuse can stem from, right? When you become someone's whole world and then suddenly you can't go out with your girlfriends, you can't meet with your mom, he's picking a fight with you when you're on your way to brunch. And I think this is And I can see why certain commentators might want to blame women for men's loneliness, but I don't think women have anything to do with that.
No, it's free market. People are now have choices and they're opting out of choices. I
I
think
just could not be married to someone who I felt like wasn't going to be the biggest cheerleader in my life. And if he's not cheerleading you and not in competition with your own family, just like they shouldn't be in competition with themselves and their family, like, it's not my husband or my sister. These are just two separate relationships that I have with people that I love and trust the most in my whole life. That doesn't mean my sister comes before my husband or vice versa, but they are both on equal footing. And there are a lot of people who might have a problem with that.
I think we largely agree. We might just have
Yeah,
a different language to talk about how to get there.
sure.
Anyway, I just since you were talking, it made me think of Eli Finkel's book, and he's really interesting to talk to if
Yeah.
you are looking for podcast guests. So before we close, what is the most, and again, this is a gotcha question because there's a million ways to go. What's the most important advice you could give to someone who's dating right now?
Most important advice. You can only access the people you want to date if you find opportunities to meet those people. And so, like what we talked about today about like extending your social circle, you have to approach every person you meet as an opportunity. So, even if you're at the grocery store and the woman behind you has this like big ass ring on her hand and you comment on it, that was another opportunity, right? Like making even female friendships that gains you access to their friends, their coworkers, their cousins, or whatever it is. And I think when you live life in that mindset that every person's an opportunity, you kind of give yourself almost main character energy because it's as if like you've now decided that the universe is presenting you people in your path to get you where you want to go. And I think if people adopt that mindset, it makes it a lot easier to be able to distinguish who should be in our lives and who shouldn't.
Right. You're the CEO of your love life. You put
Yeah.
yourself out there like that, people respond to you. That's why people respond to you, Maria, wherever you go.
Oh yeah, it's
Um,
authentic. I mean, people only care about authenticity now anyway. So I think that's what people see in me online is like that authenticity. And hopefully they'll see it in the book too, because it's a lot of storytelling. It's not, I don't think it's like a typical dating book. At least that's how I see it, because I've read a ton of dating books. But there's a lot of storytelling, and I say it's the dating book you actually finish
I think
because
that
there's a
says
lot of good stories in there, and it's a good. I think it's funny. I like doing my audiobook too. It was really hard, but it was enjoyable.
for everybody who's listening, Ask a Matchmaker is available wherever books are sold. Maria is going to be at the 92nd Street Y in New York City on May 28th with Chrissy Rutherford, and at Sixth and I. Is that correct? Sixth and I?
Six and I, yep.
Six and I in DC on June 17th. Maria, where can people find you online?
People can find me on Instagram at matchmakermaria.com. And if you hit the link in my bio, it will take you to my entire world, my matchmaking database, my coaching programs, and of course, my book and my podcast. And I hope to see if anyone comes to the 92nd Street Y or the Sixth and I, and you heard about it through this podcast, please come and say I heard about it through Evan's podcast. That would mean the world to me.
Maria, thank you so much for being here. You're an amazing person, amazing guest, have so much to offer the world, and I'm really glad you're having this big moment in the sun. It's a long time coming and well deserved. My name is Evan Marcatz. This is the Love You Podcast. If you are a regular listener, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Leave us a positive review. Tell a friend. And if you are serious about love and are looking to make it happen and be proactive about it, go to evanmarcatz.com/now and book a time to talk with me. I can't wait to talk to you. And we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.